Hi, everybody. We're at the Mamo offices today with Shruti Patel, our head of compliance. We're going to be talking a lot about what compliance means, how it works, especially in the realm of fintech. Shruti, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Shruti, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do at Mamo?
Sure. So I'm head of compliance, which means I need to maintain our license. That means speaking to our regulator, making sure that we have everything that we need to offer the financial services that we provide, submitting regulatory returns, and liaising with them on any changes that we want to make. I'm also the money laundering reporting officer, which means I need to investigate any suspicions of financial crime, which could be money laundering, it could be fraud, and then reporting that onwards to the authorities.
Super. So, money laundering, crime, fraud, these are all super interesting topics, which we'll get to. However, can you tell us a little bit more about who our regulator is and what license we at Mamo hold?
Of course. So we are regulated by the Dubai Financial Services Authority, the DFSA. They are the international regulator for financial services which are offered in and outside of the DIFC, which is where our office is. The license that we have is the Providing Money Services license, which enables us to offer payment processing, issue cards, and do international payments as well.
So you mentioned that you're also the MLRO, Money Laundering and Reporting Officer at Mamo. Can you tell us briefly what money laundering really is? How does it work?
Essentially, it's people trying to hide where their money has come from, and they're trying to put it back into the financial system undetected. So it could be money that they've gained from criminal proceeds or from doing something suspicious, and they're trying to make it look as though it's real and legitimate. So they're hiding where it's really from.
When it comes to money laundering, how does a company like Mamo actually detect that that's happening?
So there could be a few ways. One could be looking at suspicious documents which are submitted to us. Someone could have photoshopped something or forged it. Another way could be using our internal screening system, so our fraud engine. That is set with parameters which could detect activity that's outside of the usual.
So say someone attempts to do money laundering and is caught. What happens from that point onwards when it comes to our processes and systems?
So it's really important that we freeze the account immediately. We don't want to enable them to do any more transactions or to commit any more crime because someone is losing out there. So someone's card has been stolen and it's being used, which means there's a poor customer out there whose money is being taken. And importantly, we need to report them. So by freezing their account, we get all of the information that we have about them and we report it onwards. At that point, we hope that the authorities out there are going to investigate and potentially arrest them or take some form of action against them.
So this all sounds pretty scary if you're doing dodgy stuff with Mamo or with any other financial institution. Why is this important for customers who are actually legit and not doing anything sketchy?
They can feel safe in knowing that we take things seriously, so they are protected. The fact that they are giving their money to us or allowing us to process it means they have to put some kind of trust and faith in us. If we are not spotting this kind of suspicious activity, they should also be worried that we're not doing the right thing. So we can assure our customers that we stop anyone from operating illegally or doing anything suspicious, and the ones who are doing things correctly can have a smooth process where their payments are processed and they don't need to worry about anything further.
In the context of money laundering, how does money laundering actually harm a country in general? And what are the consequences of a country enabling money laundering or fighting money laundering?
This is a really important question, particularly being in the UAE, because we were on the FATF's grey list, which is the Financial Action Task Force. Now, they are an international government body which is there to fight financial crime, particularly money laundering. So the UAE being placed on there meant we were considered high risk by other countries. So firstly, perception. If other countries think that we are really risky, they don't want to do business with us. Being a country that's so innovative, we want to be building new business, promoting growth, we are then seen as risky, which means that's not great for the economy. The other real issue is that customers suffer. So there's a real cost to money laundering, which people forget. It's not just about big criminals out there doing things that no one really knows about. There's an impact on every single person in society by money laundering happening. There's people that aren't paying taxes that should be. There's much worse crimes that are happening. It could be slavery, child trafficking. There's all of these really serious, scary things that are happening, which we think are really far removed. But actually, as a financial services institution, we play a role in preventing those really large, scary crimes.
Amazing. And we've kind of touched on this before, but this sort of leads into why you got into compliance personally. So can you tell us a little bit about what got you here in the first place?
I guess it really is this fight for justice. From a very young age, I've really cared about people doing the right thing and those who aren't being subject to some form of consequence because it's caused harm to someone else. So I studied law at university, and I really felt that the legal system is there and set up to ensure that there's some form of justice. Now, in the compliance world, again, you can really see the benefits of having a strong compliance focus and culture, not just in companies, but just generally, because it does prevent people from causing harm either to customers or to fellow businesses.
So here's a question we often receive. Why is it that a fintech needs a regulatory license in the first place? Why can't fintechs just serve customers with digital products?
So it's actually illegal to do that. You should not be operating in the UAE without a license whilst you're offering financial services. So particularly in the DIFC, you have to be licensed by the DFSA. If we don't have that, we should not be operating and providing any services and advertising our products, importantly.
And what happens when you are a fintech who's operating illegally in the DIFC?
So that's where the DFSA steps in, and they would need to be taking action. They have an enforcement team that can shut down a business, they can fine businesses, and actually publicly notify and warn customers about this, because those customers are not protected in the way that the customers of a regulated company would be.
If a customer were to begin partnering or working with a fintech, how would they do their background checks on the fintech and due diligence on the fintech before partnering with them?
There is a public register that the DFSA has, which actually lists out every regulated firm and their license permissions. So a company really needs to be checking that register first and foremost and doing their due diligence. So asking this business questions like, what types of policies do you have in place? How do you operate? What license do you have to be doing what you're doing? All of which Mamo has, which is really great for us, which means we can partner with international companies and big providers knowing that our license is intact.
From the way you're describing it, it sounds like compliance is a function within an organization that helps keep everything above board and legit. Can you tell us a little bit about the potential conflicts of interest that can arise internally within a company and how regulated companies are structured to avoid that conflict?
Sure, there can be some interesting conflicts of interest, particularly where you're a fintech and you're trying to promote growth and generate revenue, which of course would benefit everyone in the business. But at the same time, you need to be balancing that out with treating a customer fairly. So an example would be the kinds of promotions that you put out there. Of course, any company wants to have quite fierce marketing and really ambitious goals and ads that they're putting out. But if you're using misleading terminology, that's where there's a bit of a problem, and you need to be thinking, actually, is that fair for the customer? Do they understand what they're signing up for? Are those rates that you're advertising really what you say they are? So there can be a conflict. Now, that's where the compliance team are really important. They should be checking your financial promotions. They should be checking that what you're saying is actually accurate and not misleading. Other conflicts can arise just between the remuneration that you're paying to your employees, and particularly your leadership team, for example. So of course it's important that you are remunerating fairly, but there could be a conflict there again. If you're on the leadership team and your role is to promote growth and revenue, then how are we doing this fairly and ensuring that the business isn't just driving one thing and not thinking about strong governance and controls and reporting suspicious activity, and actually giving appropriate time and resource and money towards those things and not simply going down the other path.
So it sounds like for a fintech that's moving relatively quickly, there's a lot of positive things happening. You're building great product, etc. How can customers rest assured that their money is safe with a fintech? What kind of measures or partnerships would a fintech need to have and controls to make sure that money is safe within the fintech?
So this is the great thing about Mamo in particular. So we have the providing money services license, which means we have to keep customers' funds segregated. So we keep them segregated in a bank account of a UAE regulated bank, which is regulated by the Central Bank of the UAE. So they can rest assured that their money is safe. Mamo can't use it for operational purposes or investment purposes or anything that's outside of what is allowed for that client money account. And the customer knows that their funds are there, safe and secure.
Amazing. So speaking of the customer, What type of customers do we typically work with at Mamo? And could you tell us a little bit about what the registration or onboarding journey looks like, purely from a compliance perspective and documentation perspective?
So generally, we are working with small to medium-sized enterprises. Now, within that, we may have businesses which have slightly more complex legal structures. So we can onboard businesses provided we understand who the business is, we've identified them, and we have the appropriate documentation. Now, for any business out there, they have to have some form of document even to register. So they will either be licensed by a particular free zone, or they will have a trade license, which enables them to operate. So that's the first and foremost document that we want. What we then need is to work out who owns that company. So for those owners, we want to be seeing the Emirates IDs, and we want to be checking exactly who owns that business. Now, sometimes you get slightly more complex structures where there's a few companies that are involved. What we'd also want in those cases is the owners of those parent companies, for example. The whole idea behind this is just understanding who owns the business. It's that simple. It's to check that it's legitimately owned and that we have enough information to be sure that there's nothing that we haven't caught in terms of suspicion, for example.
And how do we handle that information? What do we do with the information once we get it?
So we will be screening those documents, and this is where our operations team are really important. They need to be checking that these documents are legitimate, that they're not expired, and that we will keep them very safely and securely. So we understand the importance of making sure that customer data is safe. So we will protect that and only keep it for as long as we need to. We would never keep it for beyond the regulatory requirements.
Okay, so here's a question which might come up quite often. Say I'm a business and I have a trade license and it expires. How does Mamo handle that situation?
Yeah. We understand that. That's very normal and natural, and all documents that are issued by the government do expire. But all we'd want to know is that you've either reapplied for a license or that you're in the process of doing so, and then we can proceed with your application. But it's just important that you do have a new trade license coming in and that you are still continuing to operate as a business, because if you're not going to get a new trade license, then potentially you're no longer able to operate in the UAE.
In the scenario where I set up a business with Mamo, I'm happy with the services, everything's going well, and then I decide to set up another business. Can you explain to our viewers why Mamo requires that any business fully disclose what it is that they're selling at all times? And like, what do we do to help businesses grow to a point where the business owner is now owning 1, 2, 3, 4 businesses at the same time?
So we actually love that when we have customers that want to onboard all of their businesses with us, but each and every business needs to go through a separate risk assessment. So that's an expectation of the regulators, but not just the regulators. We want to understand what they're actually offering so we can provide them with the best service. So if you are a tourism agency, but then you're also doing car rentals, those are two very different business models which pose different risks. So for us, firstly, to be able to offer the right services to you, we want to know and understand what each of you are doing. But importantly, the legal documents behind these businesses are different. You may have different types of trade licenses which enable you to do different things. And there may be more owners for the second business or the third business that you've set up. So again, understanding who is owning each and every business. So we can go with the fact that we already know a bit about you, but we really need to know individual to that legal entity who sits behind that and how long you've been operating for.
Excellent. So you mentioned tourism and car rentals as a couple of examples of industries that we could serve. Are there any industries that we don't serve? Are they prohibited?
Yes, there are a list, and we do list these on our website, and it's important that we don't onboard businesses in certain very high risk sectors or sectors that are just unacceptable in terms of our risk appetite. So some of these might fall into adult entertainment, into the selling of weapons or endangered species being traded. There's a huge list on our website, but it's important that we don't welcome in those types of industries or sectors because they pose too high of a risk. Now, some of this risk could be money laundering, it could be fraud, some of it is reputation. And being in a place like the UAE, there are specific laws that we need to adhere to. And if we are allowing in sectors to operate that actually the government wouldn't allow, then that's not great for us in terms of our reputation either. And it poses a huge risk, not just to Mamo, but also to the wider economy if we're enabling payments for a company that wouldn't really be acceptable from a legal perspective.
And other than industries, what about countries? Are there any restrictions on countries that we deal with? And how does that work?
Sure. So there definitely will be. And some of these countries would either have very heavy sanctions or have something in the form of AML. So the FATF issues this grey list, which we mentioned. They actually also have blacklist. So, for example, there's North Korea and Iran that would fall into those lists, which again are heavily sanctioned. So it's really difficult for us to be enabling payments when there are either sanctions against individuals in those countries or banks or institutions.
And how often do these kind of lists, I guess they're lists, right? How often do they change?
Very regularly. So just the UAE, for example, coming off the grey list was really positive. The FATF is having regular meetings and risk assessments for each country. So depending on the action plan they have with a particular country, a country could come off it in the space of months or it could take years. It really depends on the government and how quick they are to respond and take action. The UAE was particularly quick with this, which I think is really positive for us and positive for Mamo being in the UAE.
So Shruti, can you tell us a little bit about the types of questions we ask when people or customers are onboarding with Mamo, and why do we ask those questions?
So outside of the documents that we need, we also like to find out more about the business. So it could be the website that they have, the types of products that they're selling, the expected payments amounts. Now, all of this information helps us to build a picture about this business. The more information we have about the business, the more we can help them along the way. Because there are various checks that we'll need to do on the account. But if we have a greater picture of who they are at the beginning, it will be a smoother journey for them as they go.
Perfect. And one last question for today. How does Mamo's compliance team and process differ from traditional compliance?
So I definitely believe we are different because we really, firstly, care about the customer hugely, but we are here to enable business growth and revenue. Now, this, I believe, all compliance teams should be doing. But if you're just solely focused on meeting the rules, the regulations, and ticking boxes, you're not so focused on the business itself and helping it to grow. And for us at Mamo, we want to do both. We can meet those rules, regulations, and requirements, but actually be boosting the company and enabling them to grow even quicker. So we want to be giving advice that's really helping the business to get bigger, not to be preventing anything or not to be blocking things. It's more about being creative and being innovative with our license and trying to do everything that we can to boost growth.
Amazing. Creativity, innovation within compliance. Love it. Shruti, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.